Hi and welcome back to the Gem Hawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today, no matter what it is you're doing. For the free wire tutorial today here on YouTube, I'd like to share an achievable design for a treble clef ring. Now, it's not exactly something that you might wear every single day of the week, but for special occasions I think it's really attractive. You can pop a bead in anywhere if you wanted to, but today I'm going to teach you how to make the form and how to make your life just that little bit easier with this design. So here's the ring design that we're going to work together today. I'm choosing to make this in 1.25mm or 16 gauge wire. We'll be using around about 11 inches, but what I did is practice the design first in 1mm or 18 gauge wire to get a feel for how it flows and comes together. Now it's not a tricky design, but it does take a little bit of extra finger strength, and if I tell you that this is number 25 iteration of this design, 24 failed attempts went in the bin, 24 failed sections of wire cut up and put for melting. So let's just take a quick look at the design. The treble clef is one of the, I think there's probably like 8-note clef. I'm not really a musician, so I couldn't really tell you, but it's the one that you often see most recognisably in music. And you can play around with the design a little bit, just opening up that curl if you prefer to see that open. You can change the angle, the depth, and so on and so forth. But why don't we see if this wants to sit up in the corner? Let's just grab something to pop it on. Maybe it will stay, maybe it won't, who knows. My desk is a bit of a mystery zone. So the wire I'm working with today is 1.25mm or 16 gauge round wire. This is a medium temper and I've cut around about 11 inches. Now the key to getting this design to work, whether you're practicing in 18 gauge 1mm or whether you're diving headfirst straight into that 16 gauge 1.25mm, is to make that wire warm. Now I know some people will play a flame over it and quench it in water, which is known as annealing, and that will help you get the softness that you require. This is a medium temper copper, might be better off with a slightly softer copper, but this is what I have available to me and I want to show you that it is achievable. Plus, if you're working with a medium temper, you're much more likely to end up with a more stable design. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that that first section we're going to work on is nice and flush cut, and if you can get this super warm to begin with, pop it on the back of your hand. If you feel it really toasty, you'll know you've done your job. So we're going to start with the largest part of my round nose pliers to create a round aperture. We're going to do a double coil around that section. You could go for 3 wraps if you wanted a slightly larger head on your ring. So let's start that form moving before we switch to some flat facing pliers to bring that wire around. Now the warmer and softer your wire is to begin with, the easier you will find this section. I'm showing you in the 1.25mm gauge because I want you to see that it is doable. You do need just a little bit of extra grip strength. Do feel free to practice in a lighter wire. So I'm getting the next section of wire nice and toasty warm, and I'm going to flip that over. Now if you have a specific size in mind that you want to work for, now is the time to find that on your ring mandrel. But before we actually put this onto the ring mandrel, we're going to need to close it around like a belt. So if I get this super warm and toasty, draw that wire around in a circular form, I'm going to pop the end of the wire up through that centre that we've created. Another option that you can choose to, if you're working in that lighter wire, is to hammer that coil first. I'm not going to do that, it's fairly simple. You just make sure you don't smash your fingers and try to keep those 2 bars of wire side by side as you do so. So let's find that ring mandrel, and we're going to close this up like a belt, and again it is a little bit tougher on those fingers. But what we're going to do is to draw that around until it sits on the mandrel at the size that we are looking to work towards today. So I do want that to be reasonably flat down to begin with. And if you need to, you can take that off the mandrel and check the size, which I'm going to do now. A little bit larger than I anticipated. It will probably work on another finger. I'm not overly worried. I could just make that ever so slightly smaller by moving it slightly up the ring stick or mandrel. Once you're happy to proceed from there, you can see I've gone in from underneath and out the top. You can go in the opposite direction, over the top and down underneath. Whichever way you work, I did it the opposite way on my piece that I'm showing you in the top corner. The next thing we're going to do is to push that down on the mandrel to keep the size that you've chosen and draw the wire up and away. Now I don't want it to go completely up at that 12 o'clock. If you imagine that the bar on my board is the straight up line, it's quite happily going off to the side at a bit of an angle. So I just want to make sure that I'm happy with that size. I'm going to draw that ring stick out of the way. Now if you have taken your wire up inside the loop and coming out of the top, when we bring the wire back round, you'll need to do the opposite. So for me, I'm going to take the tail, and in a moment I'm going to get this super toasty warm. Let's get some heat into that. And what we're going to do is to bring the tail all the way around. Now because I've come up and out, what I need to do is go underneath and come up out that way. And I'll show you with my bail making pliers how to get a really nice form up on this top section. The warmer your wire, the better it will be. So let's get that super toasty warm and wrap it around. Now because the wires come out of the top, I need it to come underneath and out the top in the opposite direction. So we've just folded it at the moment and we're not putting any pressure on the design just yet. I'm just going to draw that up slightly. Grab my multi-step bail makers. You can use a pencil or similar if you don't have any of these available. You need to find something that is solid because this wire is quite firm, and I'm going to use probably number 5, which is the 5th largest. I think it's 8 or 9 millimeters, something like that. And what I'm going to do is just hold that on the wire at the approximate position I want that curvature to take place. What we're going to need to do is to draw the wire around and into position, and you'll see that you get that beautiful fluid shape. Now if once you look at that, let's pop it on the finger, I think that's probably just a little bit too tall at the moment. So if you decide you need to reform the size of that upper loop, let's make sure we're using the correct part of the tool. You can just rotate that around as you bring that wire down and through. Now it's quite likely to slightly misform the ring, so what we're going to do is lift that end section up and put the ring mandrel back in for a moment. So that's about the right size for me now. I'm making a slightly more diminutive one for a smaller finger. Let's just grab this piece for a second. You can see this is a much larger ring, a much larger finger size. Let's just pop that over there. If it'll stay up, it may not, who knows. So we've got the top half of our ring sorted now. So let's just pull that wire down and through and get that super toasty. Genuinely, the thing that's going to make your life as easy as possible on this design is practice and warming that wire. I know I must sound like a stuck record. This is one that I made in an 18 gauge just as a practice piece, and I hammered the coil before I even made that belt shape and fed the wire up and through. So it's quite functional, but I wouldn't particularly want to sell or wear one that's made in an 18 gauge. It's more of a practice. And once you get that style and shape and form that you're happy with, you can move on to that heavier wire. And if you wanted to anneal the wire, you could even go to 1.5 or 1.6 millimeter, which is approximately equivalent to 14 gauge. It would make a beautifully sturdy ring in the end. So if you wanted to put that on a flame-proof surface, give that a little bit of a heat through until it's lovely cherry red, and then quench it in lovely cold water, you are doing a process known as annealing. Now, I'm not a metalwork expert, so if I'm giving you incorrect facts, then I'm just doing my best to express how you can find this a little bit easier. When you anneal your wire, you're basically turning it from whatever temper you bought it to a lovely soft wire. So you could just buy dead soft copper wire and take it from there. Once you've got that first little double coil or triple coil in the case of one of my samples. Give that a hammer before you proceed, and you'll find that the centrepiece of your ring is just that little bit stronger. But retaining that fluidity on the remainder of the wire is really helpful for getting the perfect form. And once we've got the perfect form, we can hammer those extremities to give it a little bit more rigidity and allow it to set. As I mentioned, I'm not a metal expert. I'm just trying to give you the best chance to make this design work for you. So let's say that we're happy with the shape and form of the ring shank. We're happy with the size up at the top. What we're going to do now is just remove that from the ring mandrel for a hot minute. I'm going to cut this to around about a 2-inch length from the point at which it leaves that central part of the head of the ring to the end that we've just trimmed away. So I've cut away a good sort of 3 inches there. So this is because I'm making a much smaller ring. I would say allow yourself 11 inches. And if you're planning on making this in a precious metal, then obviously practice on some scrap wire first, and then you'll know how much you need to be using. If I turn the ring upside down now, what we're going to do is to create another spiral. And I want it to be fairly similar to the first spiral we made in the centre of the ring, but ideally with a much smaller aperture in the middle. So if I start that moving around in a circular rotation and then switch over to my flat facing pliers, just twist that around until I get that coil moving. Now, because I've made quite a small ring by comparison there, I do have the option just to open that out. You can put a little bit more of a bend, a little bit more of an arc. Another thing that we're going to need to do is to straighten up this top part so it's comfortable on the finger. So if you look at it from above, you'll see that it's kind of switching out from over the top to underneath. What we need to do is just grip a hold and twist very, very subtly so that we get that to be more straight. Now it will flow over the top and then bend down slightly. So let's just give that a quick clench with those pliers and let's try that on for size. I've made it smaller than I wanted to now, but that's fine. Let's just pop that on for a second. So it's weirdly upside down at the moment. If you think that you need that to be just slightly larger, there is a tiny amount of flexibility just to push and resize that slightly. Let's take that back off my trusty wooden ring mandrel. I'm going to wear it upside down so that you can see it on the finger. So you can see that that little last manoeuvre where we switched out that top section does help it to sit more flat on the hand. But like I said, I'm neither a musician nor a metallurgist, so you can play around with how that looks to your heart's content. Before you make it in precious metal, do have a practice in a lovely copper though. And if you want that to be slightly narrower at the top, like I think I do, I'm just going to draw those two sides together. And if you needed to, you could put piece by piece onto a block. Let me just grab the block. And you could just very, very gently hammer that down. Once you're happy with the shape and the form, so let's just hammer the top bit as well, and you'll note that I'm only resting a single track of wire on the block. You also have the opportunity to hammer the shank of the ring once you're happy with the sizing on your mandrel as well. So let's just make sure that that's up far enough and that it is indeed straight all the way around that belt line. And all I'm doing is very, very lightly tapping, so it just adds a tiny amount of extra rigidity. So I would wear it on the hand this way up. Doesn't look too good with my hand in that position, but you can just play around with that until it meets your exacting requirements. You could even leave slightly longer than 2 inches if you wanted to make that sit exactly down. So let's just put the mini one, the new little one, just here. Will it fit on that smoky quartz? I don't think it even will. There we go. So there's a couple of variations, a couple of times that I've had a go at this ring. I think they're really pretty. I hope that you agree. Well, thank you for joining me today for that simplified treble clef ring. Again, I must refer to the point that I'm neither a musician nor a metallurgist. So I'm just here to play with wire and share with you what I've found, and I hope that you've enjoyed the tutorial today. Do please consider liking and leaving me a subscription on the channel, as it helps us to get seen. Have yourself a beautiful day, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.